My scariest home alone stories happened during one of the first times I was left alone as a teenager. I left alone at home on a random Sunday when my parents brought my brother to some event. I was loving the freedom and everything was going great until I decided to leave my house to see my friend. My parents specifically told me not to leave the house, and I did anyways. Not thinking in the moment I left my house, and I completely forgot to lock the door. I came home hours later and I had a terrible gut feeling. Something felt weird, and I noticed the cabinets were left open and stuff was scrambled around the house. I began to become very startled, but I didn't completely believe that someone was there because it was so quiet. I started shouting throughout the house to see if anybody was there. There was no answer. I started to feel better until my phone started ringing. I looked down and it was an unknown ID. Looking for attention, I answered the phone and I heard deep and heavy breathing. I started to get extremely scared. It felt straight out of a movie. I kept asking, "Who is this?" repeatedly until the phone hung up. 2 minutes later, I got another call and I answered to the deep breathing. It sounded like an angry voice, and I started to become impatient that they weren't saying anything. They hung again, and I got aggravated. I got another call from the unknown ID, and the breathing started again. Out of nowhere, I heard a deep and quiet voice whisper, "I'm in the house." My heart stopped and chills ran down my spine. I've never been so scared in my life, but I acted tough, thinking it was a prank call from my friend or brother, knowing I was home alone. The caller hung up this time, and I started to hear creaking from upstairs, and suddenly I heard loud footsteps. Luckily, I heard something drop before he started sprinting downstairs. I was able to get a head start on the intruder, and I disappeared into the woods and immediately called the cops. The cops reported, and the phone, the door left wide open. They never found the person that snuck in, but I'm lucky to be able to share that wild story. When I was 22, my uncle showed up at my small one-bedroom bungalow. As always, every time any of my 4 uncles showed up, my heart sunk. To say that BV was messed up would have been the understatement of the year. He has always been a dodgy character, but the uncle I have the strongest relationship with out of the 4. Personally, for me, the best of a bad bunch, and that's scraping the barrel. He, like the other 3, was a criminal at that point and associated with some pretty unsavory people. There was nothing new about that. None of the rest of the family has broken the law. My granda was a long-service soldier and a hard-working family man. Likewise, Gran gave birth to 9 babies, and in between those times had very responsible PA jobs in London. Their 5 daughters, although not having easy lives and having their own personal troubles and tragedies, have all managed to grow up in the same house without breaking the law in any way, all supporting themselves and their children by maintaining, again, very good, responsible jobs, whilst raising us, their children, to all, in one way or another, be high achievers and really good people with strong moral compasses. Back to BV. He had obviously been up to no good, as he was paranoid, jittery, and on edge. He was also using in a big way. I called my mom and she came around. I told BV he could stay the weekend, with 2 conditions: no stolen goods and no drugs. He agreed a little reluctantly and settled down. Mom decided to stay too in case it went pear-shaped. It did. The next day was Friday and my day off work. BV went out early. It was a lazy day. I was just doing a bit of tidying up. I was cleaning around a massive pot plant, and stuffed down inside it, I found a huge bag of suspect-looking white powder, which didn't look for personal use, various nasty-looking weapons, and several nice-looking pieces of jewelry. I was very narked off, to say the least. But after showing Mom, I left the dubious stuff where it was, as I needed time to think about what I should do. When BV got back from wherever it was he went, I asked about the items. He lied as usual, saying that he had down a job, legal of course, for an old friend, and that was his payment. I told him straight out I didn't believe a word he had told me, and that I wanted him and his stuff out first thing in the morning. The next day, Mom and I got up and noticed BV was gone. I looked for the stuff and saw it was still there. Mom had to work that morning. She told me she'd be straight home after, and I settled down for a quiet, chilled morning. Around 11 a.m., there was a loud knock on the door, followed by someone having fun with the buzzer. As I use a wheelchair, it takes me a bit of time to get to my front door if I'm alone, so I was getting more and more annoyed by the incessant commotion. On opening the door, I came face to face with the three of the meanest, nastiest, and skankiest men I have ever seen. They all looked straight ahead, and because I was at a lower level, their eyes went down to meet mine. To be fair, they all seemed surprised by my appearance. I was very small and skinny and looked more like 14 than 22. They all looked at each other in utter shock before I said, "Hello, can I help you?" The middle gangster, the nastiest looking one, said, "We're looking BV, sweetheart. Is he around?" One of the others said, "He said he was staying with a girl in my name." I was breaking inside, but the sheer audacity of my uncle made anger took over my fear and made me braver. I said, "No, he's not around. He's gone. He won't be back, and that's me. I'm his niece." The three thugs looked really uncomfortable and shuffled, looking at each other. I said, "Well, he has something of ours. Do you know where it could be?" The middle mean one asked, "Yeah, I'll get it for you. Wait there." I told the three of them and shut the door on them. As I did, I heard one of them saying, "That's low even for BV. You see her? She's a kid in a wheelchair." When I got back with their belongings, I shoved it at the meanest one and said, "When you do see BV again, tell him for me if he even thinks about coming here again. I'll call the police, and that goes for you too." The mean one said, "He had our stuff. We had to get it back." I said, still blagging, "That's fine. I'm just saying what I will do." The three thugs nodded and left hurriedly. After they left, I was shaking all over. I was really scared and upset. When Mom got home, I told her about the incident. She went ape. I know that at a later date she saw her brother and threatened him with something nasty if he ever came near me or bought his criminal scumbag mates around me again, and to give his to, he never has. This happened 1 year ago when my parents left with my sister for an event in Austria and told me that I would be alone in the house for 3 days. You could say I was thrilled because I hadn't been alone in the house for that long before. For the first night, everything was fine, but I woke up with a bad feeling that somebody was watching me. However, I just shrugged it off and continued sleeping. Even throughout the second day, I felt like somebody was watching me. But when I looked around the house, I didn't find anyone or anything, so I just continued with my day and watched some movies. On the final night I was home alone, I woke up between 2 and 3 a.m. and heard somebody walking outside the house again. So I put on some shoes and headed out with a flashlight. I was walking around the house when I heard a noise from the woods that were a little far from my house. But I was that stupid that I went there. And as I was walking, I heard something behind me. So I turned around, but I saw nothing. A few minutes later, I heard a scream and I ran back home. When I got home, I locked the door and looked through the curtains. And there was a person staring back at me. When he saw me, he ran toward the direction of the woods. When my parents arrived, I didn't tell them what happened, so they don't know till these days. I'd been home 5 more times since that night, but I never saw him again. I don't know who he was, but I hope I never see him again. I'm female, and some houses nearby are also known meth labs. I live in a slightly rural spot. One night, after about midnight, I hear banging on my door. I thought it was my boyfriend attempting a booty call, as he is apt to do. When I got to the door, I could see through the small glass window, but instead of my boyfriend, I saw the side of an unfamiliar bearded face. He didn't see me, and I backed away from the door. My house was in a cellular dead zone, so I knew my cell was useless. I grabbed the landline next to my bed to call 911, but the line was dead. It was just like a horror movie where the killer cuts the phone line. Meanwhile, the guy was still pounding away and slurring, "Let me in." I grabbed the biggest chef knife I own, which is pretty fucking big, and locked myself in the bathroom. I stood on the edge of the tub behind the shower curtain, figuring I might have a chance if I jumped on him from above and stabbed him between the neck and shoulder when he tried to bust down the door. I was terrified, but also pleased with my plan, and waited. He started working his way around the outside of the house. I could hear him sliding his hands along the siding and banging his fist against the walls. For a split second, I reveled in my surprisingly badass plan. Then I realized the sabotaged phone hadn't been charged in days. Maybe one of the other handsets still worked. I have never felt more fear than the moment I climbed down from my hiding spot, unlocked the bathroom door, and went in search of a second handset, all while a madman was moving around the outside of my house, violently trying to unlock every door and window. I found a phone and it worked! I dialed 911, but the closest officer was over 15 minutes away. I was told to stay on the line, but lock myself in the bathroom again. That was the longest 15 minutes of my life. When police arrived, they had me identify a cuffed, scruffy drunk off, his ass-dirty hippie kid. Apparently there had been a party down the road. He got disoriented and thought my house was his friend's house. He was trying to get back inside the party for 20 minutes of pure terror. So keep your fucking phones charged, people. My wife and I recently moved out of a home that I can only describe as fucked up. The house caused so much anger and hatred. Whatever entity resides in the home is either menacing or pure evil. Even as soon as my wife moved into the home when she was a child, she told me a story of when her and her little brother were playing one night in his room. They were playing with a leapfrog-type device. She described in detail about how she was showing her brother how to use it, and it began to act strange. Strange sounds came out of it. And then a man's voice began screaming from it. She said it was saying something about a list, something about making mistakes, screaming and cursing until she turned it off. So let's fast forward some. I met my wife a few years ago, and needless to say, she got knocked up. Haha. Wear a condom, kids, anyway. We decided that since it was the logical thing to do, I would move in with her. Sweet, no problem. At the time, I worked the night shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. This will come up later. After a few weeks of moving in, I noticed something strange about the house. The upstairs where we lived seemed menacing in a way, like someone was in the other room waiting for you. At first I brushed it off as just being nervous. New house, new life kind of thing. I also thought it was from the pretty much steady insomnia work was causing me. As time went on, I began noticing more and more. Whenever the house should have been dead silent, things would happen, footsteps up and down the hallways, knocks on doors, and sometimes I would swear I heard whispers. Being an avid believer in spirits, I wasn't particularly afraid until things started getting dark. One morning as I was lying in bed watching Netflix and hoping to fall asleep, I heard a rustling from the closet. It was just light enough in the room that you could make everything out. I saw nothing and thought maybe it was just the fan. Something moved out of the corner of my eye, and as I looked at the closet, a dark ball moved from the closet to the bedroom door. It was about the size of a softball and moved about as fast as a person could to the door. Later into the week, my wife had gotten into the bad habit of sleeping with the closet light on. I blame myself for that one. I should have kept my mouth shut. So we're lying there talking about baby stuff and women. And I noticed the curtain that covered the closet opening move. My wife was curled into me, facing my chest, and I was staring at the closet. As I kept watching, I saw what I can only describe as a tiny mist-like figure, not like white mist, but slightly darker than the rest of the background, move out from the closet. It was maybe 3 feet tall and vanished as quick as it appeared. As soon as I began telling my wife what had happened, she had a sharp pinch on her back. She didn't cry out or scream. She calmly turned around and shouted, "Get the fuck out and leave us the fuck alone." Too bad it didn't work. Now let's fast forward. You're probably wondering what else happened. Well, small stuff here and there for a while. Footsteps were regular, and I know some of you are probably saying, "It's the house settling, jackass." I would agree, but not only did the footsteps stretch out the entire length of the 20-foot hallway, they sometimes were fast, and the knocks on the doors were very rhythmic, like when you knock on a friend's door when they're home or something. So let's get to scary stuff. After this, recent Christmas things began to spark up to a new level. One day I was sitting on my computer and my wife came into the room asking me what I needed from the store. The computer room was directly across from the bathroom. Our daughter's door was to the immediate left of that, and the stairs were to the right. I began telling my wife what I wanted when she looked out the door and turned, "Well, ghost white." Her eyes got big and her mouth dropped. She slowly turned toward me. "I just saw a man walk into Elena's room." She begins describing what it looked like. It was about 6 feet tall, black, and only slightly translucent. While she's describing this, I walk out into the hallway and go into my daughter's room. Have you ever walked into a freezer like the ones Walmart stocks ice cream in? That immediate chill is what I felt when I walked in there. There was nothing, of course, but as soon as we began walking out, a set of metal bed frames we had laying against the wall for over a year, I might add, slid down and fell to the floor. My wife turned back into the room and told whatever it was to get the fuck out of our home, but it didn't, of course. Come January, things really picked up before we moved out. The power got knocked out during a sudden storm, and we were left in the dark for a night. My wife at this point wanted nothing to do with the home at this point, and wanted to stay at her dad's. So we began packing her things for the night. I went downstairs and got my daughter loaded up in the car in a
Now remember, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Then subscribe for more horrifying true stories.